Have you ever been humiliated by your own family on what was supposed to be your most special day? For Emily, a successful marketing executive in Chicago, her 34th birthday should have been her moment to shine. She had planned everything perfectly: a luxurious restaurant, a $3,000 designer dress, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, her family would finally acknowledge her worth. But in just one instant, everything came crashing down. Her 17-year-old niece Ava picked up a dark red cocktail and deliberately splashed it all over her dress, sneering, "Now you look as cheap as you really are." What left Emily frozen wasn't just the humiliating stain, but the way her mother and sister smiled, defending Ava as if it was perfectly normal. In that moment, Emily realized the truth. All those years, she had given her family $116,000, covering cars, tuition, rent, even credit card bills, and they had treated it as nothing more than her duty. But that night, in the cold silence, she made a decision that would change her life forever: to cut off the dependence, set boundaries, and finally force her family to face themselves. So what happened when Emily finally said no? Who changed? Who broke down? And was there ever a chance for reconciliation? Stay with me until the very end of this story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because you might just see a reflection of your own journey in Emily's. The darkness behind the spotlight. My invisible sacrifices. People look at me and think I'm a lucky woman, a marketing executive in Chicago, living in a luxury high-rise, driving a brand new car, and always dressed in designer clothes. Outsiders might say, Emily must be living the perfect life. But if they knew the price I've paid for that so-called spotlight, they'd understand that behind the closed doors of my family, I was never respected, never considered enough. For more than a decade, I worked relentlessly. I woke up before sunrise, rushed to the office while the city was still asleep, and came home long after the lights of downtown were glowing. My success didn't come from luck. It was bought with sacrifice: my health, my youth, and the countless tears I shed alone in my spacious apartment, where no one in my family ever visited, unless, of course, they needed money. My sister Sarah is the clearest example. While I was exhausting myself to climb the corporate ladder, she was bouncing from one low-paying job to another: waitress, receptionist, then quitting again. And every time she failed, she came back to me. At first, I thought, she's my sister, I have to help her. So I sent her small amounts of money to get by. But those small amounts snowballed into a mountain of endless obligations. Over the last 5 years, I gave Sarah more than $78,000, enough to buy a small house in the suburbs, or at least to restart her life seriously. But to her, that money was just a temporary lifeline, like the life preserver I kept throwing, while she never learned how to swim on her own. And it wasn't just Sarah. My niece Ava, only 17, had already grown accustomed to living on my dime. I bought her a brand new car worth $32,000, covered her monthly insurance, and paid for expensive ballet lessons so she could pursue her dream of becoming a dancer. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving her opportunities I never had. But what did I get in return? Disrespect, condescending looks, and later, words so cruel that they cut deeper than knives. And then there was my mother, Patricia, the one person who should have been my emotional anchor, yet she always chose to turn her back on me. To her, Sarah was the pitiful daughter who needed protection, and I was just the daughter with money. Whenever I spoke up about Sarah taking advantage of me, my mother would dismiss it. "You have more than her, so why be so petty? Sisters are supposed to take care of each other." Take care of each other? I had carried Sarah for years, to the point where she no longer knew what independence even meant. And instead of teaching her to stand on her own 2 feet, my mother encouraged her dependence. At one point, I even gave Sarah access to my credit card. It was supposed to be for essentials, but the monthly bills that came in left me stunned. Lavish dinners, luxury shopping sprees, weekend getaways, all charged to a card under my name. When I confronted her, Sarah just smirked. "You make so much money. What's a few dollars to you?" A few dollars? Those few dollars were my sleepless nights at the office, the holidays I sacrificed, the relationships I let slip away because of endless deadlines. They were the loneliness no one in my family ever cared to notice. But to them, it was all just a few dollars. And I kept telling myself maybe this was my purpose, to carry the burden, to let my money mean something by helping my family. But over time, I realized I wasn't helping anymore. I was enabling. I was feeding their selfishness, cementing a cycle of dependence that had rooted itself deeply into their lives. And that truth was so painful, it made me feel like nothing more than a walking wallet in my own family. I often asked myself, am I raising their weakness instead of their strength? Am I killing their chance to grow just to keep them comfortable? But every time those questions surfaced, I buried them. Because I was afraid that if I stopped, they would call me ungrateful, selfish, the daughter, the sister who didn't care. So I kept giving. I kept enduring. I kept living as the silent savior until that fateful night of my 34th birthday, when all my years of sacrifice were shattered by one glass of crimson cocktail. Perhaps the bitterest truth wasn't the money wasted, but the way my family saw me. They never really saw me as a person, a woman who also gets tired, who also needs love and recognition. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a walking ATM. Every time I showed up at my mother's old house, Sarah would put on her pitiful face, complaining about unpaid bills, about Ava's struggles, then turn to look at my mom. And my mother, almost like it was scripted, would glance at me with that mix of reproach and expectation. "You're so successful, Emily. Can't you help your sister a little? She's not like you. She needs you." That sentence, "she needs you," became a life sentence, chaining me to the role of a reluctant provider. No one ever asked if I needed them. No one cared that every night I came home to my silent apartment, sitting alone between four cold walls, with cracks no one could see. I remember one time, after finishing a huge project and earning a well-deserved bonus, I suggested to my mom, "Maybe I'll save this money for myself. I want to travel, to take a little break." She didn't smile. She didn't congratulate me. Instead, she frowned. "While your sister is still struggling, you're thinking about vacations? Emily, you're so selfish." Selfish? I had worked myself to the bone for more than a decade. I had given Sarah and Ava over $116,000 in total. And yet, the one time I wanted to do something for myself, I was branded selfish. In that moment, I understood. In this family, my worth was never about who I was as a person. It was only about the money I earned. Worse still, Ava, the niece I thought I was giving opportunities to, showed no gratitude at all. I remember rushing out of an important presentation once just to pay her ballet tuition. When I sighed about my work being disrupted, Ava glared at me and snapped, "If it bothers you, then don't help. But without this class, I'll have no future." Do you want me to fail? A 17-year-old accusing me of wanting her to fail when I was the one keeping her dream alive every single day. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I started asking myself, had I created a generation that only knows how to demand, but not how to be grateful? And yet, because they were my family, I stayed silent. I kept paying insurance bills, kept approving Sarah's endless credit card charges, without ever hearing a single thank you. I kept pushing through, telling myself, just endure a little longer. It'll get better. But I was wrong. The more I stayed silent, the deeper I was pushed into the pit of their contempt. My family began to assume that whatever they wanted, I would provide, and if I hesitated, the accusations would come immediately. You have money and won't help? Then what good are you to this family? Those words cut like knives, carving deep scars into my heart. I had sacrificed my youth to build a career, yet in their eyes, I was nothing more than a money printing machine. There were nights I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, asking myself, where did I go wrong? Do I really deserve to be treated this way? But every morning, I forced myself to rise, put on my tailored suit, and plaster on a smile for the world, while inside, my heart was bleeding. And then came my 34th birthday. I poured every fragile hope into that night. For once, I wanted my family to see me as a daughter, a sister, an aunt, not just a walking wallet. I planned every detail: the upscale restaurant, the elegant Stella McCartney dress worth $3,000, a statement that whispered, Emily deserves respect. But I didn't know that in just a few short seconds, whatever fragile trust I still had left in my family would be shattered by a single glass of crimson cocktail, and the way they all stood by Ava's side instead of mine turned my 34th birthday into a scar that will never fade. 34th birthday. A blood-red night. I had been planning my 34th birthday party for weeks. Deep down, I knew I didn't need extravagance, but I craved something else. Recognition. I wanted my family to see that I was more than a walking wallet, more than just the child with money. I wanted them to see me as a successful, confident woman who deserved respect. The luxurious restaurant in downtown Chicago, where crystal chandeliers cast sparkling reflections on every glass, was not chosen merely for its grandeur. I hoped that in that space, they might see me differently. I reserved a table large enough for both family and close friends. That night, I wore an emerald green Stella McCartney dress worth $3,000, a gift I bought for myself. The dress wasn't just clothing. It was a declaration. I walked here on my own 2 feet to earn this life. I still remember standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate cuts hugging my body, whispering softly, Emily, tonight they will finally have to acknowledge you. My friends arrived one by one, bringing smiles and heartfelt gifts. They complimented my glow, praised the splendor of the party, and I felt a small weight lift off my chest. But as the clock ticked past 45 minutes from the set time, my family's seats remained empty. I forced a smile, joked with my friends that maybe they're stuck in traffic, but inside, the familiar unease began to stir. They were late, as always, and I knew their lateness wasn't mere coincidence. It was a way of diminishing me. At last, Sarah and my mother appeared, followed by Ava. I can still recall the way the restaurant turned to look at them. While my guests were dressed with elegance, Ava had chosen a midriff-bearing crop top and ripped jeans, her messy red-dyed hair framing a face full of defiance. I forced a faint smile. Thank you for coming. I'm really glad to have Mom, Sarah, and Ava here. My mother gave me a half-hearted nod, without a word of congratulations. Sarah's eyes wandered, more fascinated by the restaurant's luxury than by my birthday. And Ava. She looked me up and down with cold, piercing eyes, as if I were a stranger. The dinner began, but the divide between two worlds became clear. My friends chatted enthusiastically about work, travel, and new projects. They tried to draw my mother and Sarah into the conversation, but both replied with short, detached answers, eyes distant. I sat in between, one side offering recognition, the other radiating estrangement. I felt like a fractured being, desperately trying to bridge the gap, only to make it wider. Then came the fateful moment. When the waiter carried out a tray of cocktails, Ava picked up a glass of deep red cranberry. Her eyes lingered on my dress, and a smirk crept across her face. In front of everyone, without warning, she hurled the cocktail straight at me. The blood-red liquid splashed across my Stella McCartney dress, soaking it through. The entire room fell silent. I heard the sharp whispers of my friends, felt their stunned eyes fixed on me. While I stood frozen, Ava tilted her head and unleashed words that cut like a blade. "Now you look as cheap as you truly are." It was as if the air itself collapsed around me. I stood there, dress dripping cold, heart aching, fighting to keep the tears from spilling. But the deepest wound wasn't Ava's act. It was my mother's and Sarah's response. In that moment, I waited for a scolding from my mother, a reproachful glare from Sarah, any sign that they recognized Ava's behavior as wrong. But all I received was silence. My mother, Patricia, didn't rush to shield me, didn't scold Ava. Instead, she sighed softly and said a sentence that made my heart tighten. "Emily, it's just a dress. Why are you overreacting?" Just a dress? To her, it was just a red-stained piece of fabric. But to me, it symbolized all the effort and confidence I had built. I bought it with hard-earned money, with sleepless nights, with the tears I swallowed in the office when the whole world turned its back on me. And in just 1 second, it was destroyed. Not by accident, but by the deliberate act of a niece I once loved and protected. Sarah sat back in her chair, arms crossed, lips curling into a half smile. She didn't defend me, she poured fuel on the fire. "Emily, you're always too sensitive. Ava is just a kid. Don't nitpick every little thing she does. Don't forget, you weren't exactly easy to deal with either." I turned to Sarah, stunned into silence. I had given her over $78,000, paid off countless meaningless debts she caused, and yet today, in front of my friends and colleagues, she chose to side with her daughter, justifying her humiliation of me. And Ava, she stood there, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She could see that I was humiliated, and she relished it. When a few of my friends tried to stand up, to speak in my defense, Ava shot them a haughty glance and shrugged. "She always pretends to be so classy, so I just wanted everyone to see her true face." I felt my heart explode in my chest. Pretend to be classy? I had worked my entire life to escape poverty, to never have to beg, to never live dependent on anyone. And now, all of that was twisted into a cruel insult. As I trembled, trying to contain the pain, a close friend gently placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Emily, you don't have to endure this. They don't deserve you." That whisper nearly made me cry, because it stood in such stark contrast to the bitter silence of my own flesh and blood. I turned to my mother, trying to find one last shred of fairness. "Mom, don't you see Ava went too far? Don't you see I'm being humiliated?" But she only shook her head, her voice cold, as if I were the one causing trouble. "Emily, you need to learn to control yourself. You always think someone is against you. Just take it as a joke." A joke? On my birthday, in front of friends and colleagues, my $3,000 dress, my dignity, my self-respect, all reduced to a joke. I sat there, body trembling, struggling not to cry. I could feel the whispers around me, see the averted eyes of some guests, the pitying looks of others. I, the woman they once admired, had become the centerpiece of humiliation. And it was my own family who, instead of protecting me, turned me into a laughingstock. In that moment, a harsh truth crept into my mind. They had never been on my side, and maybe they never would be. I took a deep breath, determined not to collapse right there at the table. I forced a smile, continued chatting with my friends, while inside, my heart shattered into pieces. But that very night, I made a decision that would change everything. Breaking the chains, a painful but liberating decision. I walked out of the restaurant, my dress drenched in red, head bowed low to avoid the pitying eyes of my friends. But in that humiliation, I had a moment of clarity. I had let my family take advantage of me for far too long. If I didn't put a stop to it, they would trample me again and again. The next morning, I sat in my luxurious apartment, holding a bitter cup of coffee. Beside me was a stack of papers, bank statements, credit card bills, car documents, and the long list of transfers I had made to my sister and niece. When I added them up, the number stared back coldly: $116,000 over 5 years. Enough to buy a small house, enough to restart a family's life. But to my family, it was nothing more than an obligation that Emily had to shoulder. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Hello, I want to immediately cancel Sarah's access to my supplementary credit card. No one but me is allowed to use this card anymore. The bank employee confirmed, and I heard in my own voice a firmness I had never known. Next, I called the insurance company to terminate Ava's car policy. That car was under my name, and I had decided to take it back. I knew Ava would rage, but I could no longer let a 17-year-old disrespect me while cruising around in a car bought with my money. 3 days later, I invited my mother, Sarah, and Ava to my apartment. I knew this conversation would turn into a battlefield, but this time I was ready. I was no longer the weak Emily. They arrived late, as usual. Sarah folded her arms, her voice sharp. "Why did you call us here? Are you still making a fuss about the birthday thing?" I didn't answer. I placed a thick file down on the glass table. Inside were the proofs: statements, receipts, transfers. I looked each of them in the eye. In 5 years, I've spent $116,000 on this family, $78,000 for Sarah, $32,000 for Ava's car and insurance, the rest in countless other supports. And what did I get in return? A public humiliation on my birthday and endless disdain. I pulled out another folder, screenshots of Ava's mocking post on social media. It read, "Couldn't stop laughing seeing someone try to act classy, only to reveal how cheap they really are." I read the words aloud. Ava's face flushed red, but she showed no remorse. She smirked. "It was just a joke. You're too sensitive." Sarah immediately jumped in. "She's just a kid, sis. Don't make a big deal out of it. Let it go." I looked at them, bitter but resolute. "No, not this time. I've canceled the credit card. I've taken back Ava's car. From today on, all financial support ends. Everyone will have to fend for themselves." As I expected, the room exploded. Sarah slammed her hand on the table, her face red with rage. "Are you insane? You have money and yet you'll let me and Ava suffer? You're selfish, Emily. Have you ever thought about anyone but yourself?" I stared at her, eyes cold. In my head, a question echoed. "And have you ever thought about me?" But I didn't say it aloud. Instead, I slid the bank statements toward her. Numbers spoke louder than any argument. My mother refused to yield. She glared at me, her voice trembling with anger. "Emily, I'm truly disappointed. Family is supposed to take care of each other. By doing this, you're abandoning your sister and your niece. I raised you to be compassionate. How did you become so cruel?" I clenched my fists under the table, steadying my voice. "Mom, compassion doesn't mean being exploited. I've been compassionate my whole life, and all I've received in return is contempt. I won't accept it anymore." Ava scoffed, crossing her arms. "Please, you just like to show off your power. You want control to boss everyone around. You don't actually care." I met her eyes, the same eyes I used to be proud of when she danced on stage. Now they were filled only with defiance. My voice cracked but remained firm. "If caring means letting you believe you can insult others and still have a car to drive and money to spend, then you're right. I don't care. I choose to let you learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." The air grew heavy. Sarah burst into tears. but I knew they weren't tears of remorse, only anger at losing her accustomed support. My mother resorted to her oldest weapon, guilt. Emily, this breaks my heart. What will happen to your sister and your niece without you? Do you want to see this family fall apart? I lifted my head, eyes blazing with long suppressed determination. No, Mom. What's tearing this family apart is dependence, favoritism, and the constant disrespect toward me. I've done everything, yet never once received respect. If this family is to survive, it must begin with independence, not clinging to me. The three of them fell silent. I stood, my voice unwavering. This door will always be open if you come with respect, but it will remain closed forever if you come only to demand and belittle. I've said all I need to say. Now please leave. They stormed out in anger. Sarah walked quickly, casting me a resentful glare. Ava pouted, muttering under her breath, "You'll regret this." My mother paused at the doorway, staring at me for a long moment before shaking her head. "You've changed, Emily. You're no longer the daughter I once knew." The door shut. I leaned against it, legs trembling, breath unsteady. My heart ached, but strangely, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. In the days that followed, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Texts full of insults, accusations, mixed with pleas. They tried everything, threats, begging, even invoking family duty. But I no longer wavered. My decision was made. I knew I had started a war, but I also knew this was the only way to save myself and the only way to force them to change. After the storm, 6 months that reshaped my family. 6 months after that blood-red birthday night, my life and my family's had turned a new page. At first, I thought I had lost them forever. I accepted that because I could no longer live as nothing more than a walking wallet. But to my surprise, my firm decision became the very catalyst that forced each member of my family to change. The one who surprised me most was Ava. From a proud, spoiled girl who was used to being supported, she was suddenly forced to face reality for the first time in her life. Her car was repossessed, her allowance cut, her tutoring fees unpaid. At first, Ava lashed out, sending me angry, insulting messages. But when she had no other choice, she had to find a job. I heard from a friend that Ava had taken a part-time position at a clothing store in the mall. For the first time, I saw my niece earning her own money through her own sweat. One afternoon, Ava came to me. She knocked on my apartment door, standing there in her work uniform, face still glistening with sweat. Her trembling voice was nothing like the arrogant child I once knew. "Auntie, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I used to think money was just a given, that it was your responsibility to provide for me. But now, after working just to earn a few $100s, I finally understand how hard you worked." I stayed silent for a long moment, listening to every word. For the first time, Ava no longer looked like an ungrateful child, but a young woman slowly maturing. She continued, "I'm preparing my college applications. I want to pay part of my tuition myself, at least try. Will you give me a chance to make things right?" Tears welled in my eyes. I nodded gently. "I'll always give you a chance, Ava. What I need isn't money paid back, but respect. And today, you've begun to show that." That hug we shared was clumsy, but it was sincere. I knew Ava had begun her journey toward independence. Sarah, too, could not escape change. When I stopped supporting her, she resisted the hardest. At first, Sarah called constantly, accusing me of cruelty and abandonment. But when the bills piled up and I was no longer there to pay them, she had no choice but to find a serious job. 6 months later, Sarah called me, her voice softer than usual. "Emily, I found a job as an office manager. It's nothing glamorous, but at least it's stable. I've also moved into a smaller, cheaper apartment. And I have to admit, I was wrong to depend on you for so long. I froze. Never in my life had I heard Sarah admit fault. Her voice lowered. I'm sorry. I treated you like a wallet, not like a sister. Only now do I realize how much I hurt you. My heart ached. The apology came late, but it was still a healing balm. I didn't answer right away. I only sighed, then said, what I want most isn't money repaid, but respect and maturity. If you truly change, I'm ready for us to start over. Sarah cried, but these tears were different. No longer tears of anger or resentment, but tears of relief at finally standing on her own feet. The last person to change was my mother, Patricia. For years, she had always favored Sarah, always downplayed my achievements, but when I set my boundaries and firmly walked away, she began to feel the emptiness. 6 months later, she called me, her voice no longer proud or commanding. Emily, I was wrong. I always thought you were strong, that you didn't need recognition. But I was mistaken. I let you endure far too much. I stayed silent, my eyes blurring. For the first time in my life, my mother admitted she was wrong. She added, now all I want is to have my family back, not for you to keep providing, but simply to share a meal with you, like real family. That night, I sat alone for a long time, reflecting on the 6 months that had passed. Yes, they were full of tears and pain, but they also brought something precious. They had changed, and perhaps it was time for me to try opening the door once more. As my 35th birthday approached, I couldn't help but think of the previous year, the day that had left me with one of the deepest scars of my life. But this year, I decided to give my family another chance. No fancy restaurant, no designer dress. I chose my mother's old kitchen, the place where everything began. That evening, the table was set simply. Just my mother's familiar stew, a few dishes of vegetables, and a small cake. I arrived early to help her prepare. Patricia hesitated as she spoke. Emily, I know nothing can make up for the years that have passed, but I want you to feel that tonight you are no longer alone. I smiled. For the first time, I heard no reproach, no criticism in her voice, only sincerity. Sarah and Ava arrived as well, earlier than usual. I noticed Sarah was neatly dressed, her expression calmer, no longer carrying her old dismissive air. She handed me a small box, clumsily but carefully wrapped. It's not much. Just a fountain pen I saved up for. I want you to use it to write better things for yourself. And an apology, Emily, from the heart. I looked into her eyes that, for the first time, didn't turn away. I nodded softly and embraced her. In that embrace, I felt a change I had once thought impossible. Ava stepped forward, looking hesitant. In her hands was an envelope. She placed it in front of me, her voice trembling. Auntie, I know this money is nothing compared to all you've given me, but I want to return $200, the savings from my job at the store. It's not to repay a debt, but to say thank you. And I'm sorry, truly. I opened the envelope and saw the neatly folded bills. I couldn't hold back my tears, not because of the money itself, but because of its meaning. Ava had finally understood the value of work, of responsibility, of gratitude. I held her hand. I don't need the money. I only need you to keep this sincerity. Remember, independence isn't meant to create distance. It makes love more enduring. The atmosphere in that old kitchen slowly warmed. Laughter began awkwardly, then flowed more naturally. We ate together, sharing small stories. No mockery, no cutting remarks. Only people learning how to start again, with respect. As the small birthday cake was cut, my mother placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Happy birthday, Emily. I'm proud of you, not for how much money you have, but because you taught this family the lesson I should have taught long ago, to live responsibly, and to cherish one another. I nodded gently, my heart swelling with warmth. It wasn't the lavish party of the year before, but it was the most meaningful birthday of my life. After dinner, I sat quietly, watching everyone clean up together. A simple scene, but one that had felt like a luxury to me for so many years. I realized something. Sometimes, for a family to truly bond, there must be boundaries. Setting boundaries is not selfishness, it is the deepest act of love because it forces everyone to grow. At 34, I was humiliated in front of the world. At 35, I received respect and sincere apologies. And I knew the journey wasn't over. But at least we had begun to walk together, not in dependency, but side by side. Looking back, I realized a bitter but vital truth. Family does not always equal love and respect. Without boundaries, we can easily become tools for others to lean on, or even trample over. For years, I mistook sacrifice for love. I believed providing, carrying burdens, and suffering in silence was the way to keep a family together. But in reality, I had nurtured dependence, enabled disregard, and allowed myself to be hurt. Setting boundaries is not selfish. On the contrary, it is the greatest act of love, because when we dare to say no, we force our loved ones to stand on their own feet, to grow, and to understand the value of effort. Boundaries are what pushed Sarah to find stable work, what taught Ava the value of every dollar she earned, and what finally led my mother to admit her mistakes. If I had continued providing, they would never have changed. And more importantly, boundaries protect us. I have learned that we deserve love and respect, even within family. No one has the right to take away our peace or our dignity, not even those who share our blood. The message I want to leave with you is this: have the courage to face the truth. If you are in a selfish family where you are belittled and used, remember that you have the right to say no. The difficult choices you make today can open the door to healing tomorrow, not only for you, but for your loved ones as well. Because sometimes, only when we stop, do they finally learn how to walk. And now, I want to invite you, those listening to my story, to share your own experiences. Have you ever faced a selfish family? Have you ever set boundaries to protect yourself? Write it down in the comments below. Your story may be the inspiration someone out there needs, someone who is struggling with the same pain but hasn't yet found the courage to stand up. If you feel this story speaks to you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because perhaps, with just one share, you might help someone find the strength to change. Finally, I want to remind you of this. Saying no does not mean abandoning your family. Sometimes it is the strongest way to say, I love my family, because you've given them the chance to grow and given yourself the peace you deserve.